So Tactical Thursday today with Paramount. We're talking a little bit about title, I guess, right?
That's correct.
Heck yeah. So I know you've been on these trainings forever and a day, but we may have some new agents that are on there. So if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves, and then I'll let you go ahead and take the floor, but in this case, take the screen. You should have rights to be able to share your screen and all that good stuff. And I'll be here helping facilitate, get questions asked and answered and stuff for you.
Awesome. Can you also bring Misty in? She is in the chat room as well.
Oh, okay, Misty, I got you.
Today we got the whole crew. So
that's fantastic. I feel I'm blessed right now. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We're all blessed.
All right, Misty, I'm giving you co-host. Boom, shakalaka. There we go.
How you roll?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so give me just a second. I am having some internet difficulties. I hope that you guys can hear me okay. It looks like the connection is not the greatest in the office that I'm at today. Of course, that would be the case, right?
Of course.
So it's running a little slow for me, and I apologize. But bear with me just a second.
I can definitely hear you, though. You're good to go.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. As long as I don't freeze in some awkward position when I'm talking, we're good.
I'll just take a couple screenshots when that happens. It's all good. Save it for you for later, okay?
No, you should. That would be hilarious. I would totally do that. Oh, for the love. So sorry. This is taking a minute to upload.
Oh, it's okay.
Usually it's like that.
Feel free. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and welcome and do that. And then worst case scenario, if we have hiccups, if it's a presentation, if you want to email it to me real quick, I can share my screen while you guys are talking too. If it comes down to that.
Perfect. I will forward this to you now because for some reason it's not. And what is your email address? Because I don't have it on my computer.
Jimmy McNally at c21be.com.
Okay, it just sent. So
okay.
Hopefully that won't take forever and a day. So while we're waiting, just so you guys know who I am Sean. I know I've met a lot of you. You guys have been on a lot of my classes, and I appreciate that, and a lot of our classes. I am the regional manager for Paramount Title, and I have been with the company for almost 8 years. I should say back with the company. That guy you know is Aaron Davis. I trained him years ago. So look at him now, right? I did something right. I'm just kidding. He was raised in Title anyway, so his mama brought him up and taught him how to pull staples out of the carpet, and that's how he got his start. So just a little humor for this Thursday morning that we all can use, and crazy times. So I like to tell everybody, obviously, you're in a business to educate your buyers, your sellers, and we are here to help you with that education. Title, of course, can be very boring. It's not the funnest, most exciting thing to do or talk about. However, the best enjoyment that we get out of it is when we get to see your buyers and sellers meet and achieve their goals, which is buying and selling their new dream home, first-time home buyers, selling their home, maybe to buy their dream home, whatever that case is. Maybe they're settling in for retirement. It's an exciting time for them. So that's what we love to do. And knowledge is power. So we love to help you with that, give you that education, so you guys can know how to handle your clients when situations arise. And of course, we are always here to help you with those situations. So did you get that fun email yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
So you may just get to look at me today.
Once I get it, we'll rock it out. I'm checking
rock and roll.
We'll rock and roll.
Yeah. That's right. I want to know, is Heather on this morning?
there a Heather in here? Let's see.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I
Not
didn't see
our
a
Heather.
there.
Not our Heather. She's an agent.
I don't see any Heathers on the attendees list.
I was going to give her a shout out, so that's all right. She is probably busy.
It will get here.
You know what? I think mine is finally, it's finally starting to communicate with me. So hang tight, guys, I promise. At the end of this presentation, I do have some great tidbits of information I want to share with you all. So please hang tight with us. It's very important information I want you guys to know to help protect you, protect your buyers that you may be working with in these situations of some things that's happening in the industry. So I am looking forward to sharing that with you as well. So do stick around. I promise you it'll be worth your while.
Oh, it's definitely worth their while. Oh, yeah.
Always,
yeah.
always. Yep. All right. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I think I got it. You can ignore my email if it ever comes through.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see
there we
my
go.
PowerPoint?
Yes, you're good.
Sweet. All right. Let me get that to go away. There we go. Slideshow. Okay, Title 101. Let's talk title today. All right, there we go. So Title 101, we are going to talk about commitments, which are so much fun. We're going to talk about surveys. We're going to talk about what actually is title. What does title do for you? How does it protect you? So we're going to scratch our head for a minute. So title insurance protects the buyers and the mortgage lenders against defects or problems with the title when there is a transfer of property or ownership. I'm sure that sounds great, and you guys know exactly what that means. It's all just as clear as mud can possibly be. So I'm going to kind of give you a scenario. So picture this. You just purchased your dream home. It is the most beautiful place you've ever seen. It's oceanfront property. You can't disagree that that is gorgeous if you love the ocean and you love the water like I do. Some people love the mountains. Some people love the mountains and the ocean, and they get the best of both worlds. So it just depends on where you're at. But in this case, we have, beautiful location. Again, talking about location, location, location. And I keep having to move you guys around on the screen. I don't know if you can see me moving you, and I apologize if you can. Okay, so you are loving every second of it. Then it happens. You get a knock on the door. The person at the door is a bit upset. He is claiming that you are in his house. However, you don't understand. You purchased this house with your hard-earned money. You saved a long time for it. You met the seller. He gave you a deed. You gave him a check. Everything was great. It sounded great. He seemed very nice and sweet and excited about selling the home. And you were obviously excited about getting that home. So quick, easy, and he was the most honest and sweet man you knew. Or was he? So was he really that honest and sweet? Well, let's see. Turns out he was the long lost son, twice removed from the family in the will. What happens to the house in this case and all of your hard-earned money that you used to purchase this house at that time? Anybody want to take a guess based on the little face there turning upside down? Unfortunately, with title insurance, your dream home is now a total loss. Without title insurance, excuse me, not with, without title insurance, your home is a total loss at that point. You've taken all this money you put into your heart and soul to purchase the house that you've loved forever, and you've lost it. The person made off with your money, and you didn't have an insurance policy to protect you against those claims. So I would be like this little guy, I would be crying pretty heavily. All right, so what would be the difference if you purchased title insurance in that situation? Well, we would of course do a complete and thorough search on the property to locate any potential interest in the property. We would confirm the property is free and clear of any mortgages, liens, and judgments. We will of course ensure there are no title defects or clouds on title, meaning that the person who knocked on the door claiming to have an interest in the property, we would have located him. And the good news about that is even if we didn't, you would still be protected from that. And best of all, that big, amazing dream home that you purchased with all of your hard-earned money, that would be 100% covered. So again, even if we didn't find or we missed something, that's the beauty of title insurance. It protects you against those types of claims and those types of issues. The person committed fraud, title insurance protects you against fraud. So definitely worth the money that you spend on it. And it's a one-time policy. You never have to buy it again. Homeowners insurance, you have to buy yearly, right? You have to pay for it every year, just like you have to pay for your car insurance every 6-month renewal or every 12-month renewal that comes up. Title insurance protects you for the life that you own the property. It's a one-time purchase and you're done. So now you can relax. You can enjoy the finer things in life, like that pool and that amazing sunset in your beautiful home, and you have peace of mind. So for a few hundred up to a few $1,000s, you're covered for the entire time that you own the property. And like that guy, I'd be going, whew, I don't have to worry about that. So let's talk a little bit about what is a commitment and what is its purpose. This is where, we get a little granular in title. This is what we get. It's contractual that we provided to you. We provide it to your buyers, your sellers, so that they can all see what's shown on the title commitment. So we're just going to kind of break it down for you a little bit in detail. Not too much detail. I don't want to bore you to death with it, of course, but the Schedule A is kind of the details of the transaction. So the Schedule A is going to include your buyer, who we're going to insure. It's going to include the mortgage lender if there's a mortgage securing or a mortgage that's being used to purchase the property. It's going to include the person who is entitled, which we always want to make sure matches the person who signed the contract, right? It's going to include the property address, or excuse me, not the property address, the legal description of the property that we're ensuring that the buyer is purchasing. So of course, we're going to make sure that also is the same as what you have on the contract. Schedule B is everything that we have to complete in order to ensure title. So that's things we have to complete at or before closing. That can be payoffs, judgments. If there's a probate that needs to be done on the property, if there's a corrective deed that needs to be done, it's going to include all those things that are going to be required of us in order to give your seller or your buyer a clear, good title insurance policy. And then schedule.
I wanted to add too, sometimes with the title requirements, if you do come back, if a title commitment does come back and it's got, some things on it that require, some investigation is what we call that. Those things can take some time. So just, be patient with us because, sometimes we have to get in contact with, people that haven't, owned the property for, 10, 15 years and, we're having to do skip traces on them. And, sometimes they're not really in a hurry to call us back. So just keep that in mind. And we actually do run into that quite a bit.
And there are times kind of like the scenario we just went through where, I'm sorry, you froze. I thought you were done.
No, I just wanted to say that it does happen. Definitely not something we want to rush through. We do want to get your deals closed as soon as possible, but we also want to make sure that it's right because we never want your clients to, run into an issue later on. We don't want them to be upset with us, upset with you and calling later on and going, hey, what happened? So definitely takes time and we want to do it right for you.
And kind of like the scenario we just talked about too, in that scenario, that could have happened 3 sellers ago, and maybe one heir signed off on the deed and there were 3 heirs, and it was a property that was owned by a deceased person. And we have to go back and find those other 2 heirs. Then we have issues if there are judgments and liens against those people. Like it can get very in depth and in detail, and those things can of course take time. So we're always going to be upfront with you. Transparency is something that we like to be very transparent on these types of things so that you know what you're dealing with. And when you have an issue like that, we can let you know up front, like this is going to take a little bit of time. We're going to do as quickly as we can, but that contract date may not be a realistic contract date at that point. So we want to make sure that you're aware of what's happening and what we're doing to correct it and fix it and working as hard as we can to get it done, but also setting that expectation. There's a possibility it may not happen by that date, and this is why. So good point, Misty. Thank you. On Schedule B2, these are everything that we are basically going to take exception to on the final policy. We don't go into a lot of details on those, but it typically, is your HOA restrictions, easements, any type of encroachments that are on the property from a survey that we have on file. If there is no survey, all survey exceptions are left on the final policy. So we basically do not cover anything, with the boundary lines of the property at that point without a survey. So for those of you that are newer, you may not have ever seen a title commitment. So this is what the Schedule A looks like. You'll see here, this includes your buyer. It includes the purchase price of the property here that's going to be insured. So we want to make sure that matches your contract. The lender's amount that they are going to loan to the buyer on this property and the name of the lender, who is the greatest lender ever. And then of course your seller, who is a seller be seller. This is who should be signing our contracts. We want to make sure that this matches what we have on the contract. And then of course your Schedule A would be your legal description that would be attached to that. And then this is all the requirements. On this one, there's quite a few. There's mortgages. There's a dismissal of lis pendens, meaning that person was in default on their mortgage at some point in time. If they're not still in default, we just have to find that out. If they are, then we are usually dealing with an attorney, which again can take a little more time and getting that payoff. And then of course, we have to double check that prior to closing to make sure there's no additional fees that have been added to that payoff. So all of those things can take into it needs to be taken into consideration with the closing date and making sure that everything is done as quickly as possible. There's some affidavits, etc. Again, I don't want to bore you with all of this stuff. We actually have a title site that says title is boring. It takes you back to our site, but title can be a little boring. So I apologize for that. But
Hey, Sean,
essentially what we do.
John Evans asked about the PACE program.
Uh-huh.
What that would be on the title, I'm assuming, John, that's what you're looking for.
Yes. So that is found when we do our lien search and in our exceptions, or excuse me, in our lien search. So basically, when there is a PACE lien against the property, that lien is superior to any other lien out there. Meaning if we were to file another mortgage on the property or anything like that, that lien would be superior and that lender would be in a second lien position at that point. So that's why on the PACE liens, we actually have to pay those in full at the time of closing. I am going to kind of defer to Misty and Megan. I have heard potentially of some subordinations that are done on those. Is that correct, ladies? Do you know?
So we've had clients ask, but I don't know the outcome of those. I will have to double check on that and get back. Maybe that's something that we can just send a follow-up email.
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I've seen, like you, I've seen them ask for them. And I think there have been a couple maybe that I know of that have been successful. I'll just have to confirm that like you, I want to make sure, but there is potentially that possibility there. I'm not going to guarantee that possibility is there, but a potential possibility. So
I had one pop up on my commitment as attached to the mortgage that they did. So somebody else did it before us and it popped up actually on my requirements with the PACE.
Okay. So it was done after, but it was done after their mortgage.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They attached it as a rider to their mortgage.
Yep.
So Amber is asking, what is an example of a PACE lien? So a PACE lien is something that would be like solar panels is the only thing that would come to mind at the moment.
Air
Sean,
conditioning.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Misty. I'm just going to kind of follow back off of you. I know what you were saying, but a PACE lien would be like if somebody gets solar panels put on their home. Are you laughing at me, Jimmy?
No, not at all.
Okay, just making sure.
I'm gonna butt out.
I'm like, am
I'll
I
butt out.
frozen? Is my face cockeyed, or what are you laughing at?
I just smile all the time. Like
All
that's
right,
what-
so yes, a PACE lien would be like solar panels. It can be a new roof. It can be windows, anything like that. They can file a PACE lien against the property for any of those things. Yes, AC, water system, all that stuff, they can file a PACE lien against your property for that. And some of them are very expensive. So especially the solar panels, I think I've seen them in upwards of like $30,000 to pay them off. So yeah. And the bad thing about that is that the sellers don't realize when they've had these things put on the property that this lien is not only attached to your property, but it has to be paid, and they think their buyer can just assume that assessment at the time it closes. And unfortunately, that's not the case in most circumstances that I'm aware of. Again, I'm not sure about the subordination. We'll find out more about that. I've just heard through the grapevine a few times of people asking for that. So I will get more clarification on that. We'll send out an email to Megan and Misty, and they can definitely share that with the group. And
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So moving right along. We are really moving right along. So what is a survey? This is something we talked about a moment ago, and making sure, saying we can insure over survey exceptions if we don't have a survey. If we do have a survey, of course, if there's any encroachments, that's going to be an exception on the policy, meaning that's not going to be something that we're going to cover. So an example of that would be a fence that's in an easement. We're not going to insure over that fence that's in the easement. If the county were to come back, it's a utility easement, let's say, and the utility company were to come back and say, you've got to move your fence back towards the house 20 feet because that 20 foot belongs to us and we need access to that, then that would be at the owner's expense. So that's what that means when we say we accept that on the policy, meaning we're not going to cover it. So a survey is a map of real estate property that shows where the property is located on the earth, the boundary lines of the property, the improvements on the land, and access to the property. So some very important details there. It shows you the boundary lines of the actual property. It shows you where any improvements sit on the property. So where the house sits on the property, if there is a barn, a shed, a detached garage, anything like that, it's going to show where that sits on the property. And the most important thing is it's going to show your access to the property. That is something you obviously want to make sure that every seller has. Usually when you're in a platted subdivision, that's not an issue, but it's when you're dealing with large parcels of land that you want to ensure that they have access to the property. So that if they have road frontage, most likely they have a right-of-way easement there that gives them access. If it's behind a property that has road frontage, that's where you get a little sticky, and you want to make sure that that easement's been granted across that property in the front to get to that property in the back. Looks like we have some more. Oh, okay, Megan has been. How come the buyer doesn't usually see the survey until closing? That's a great question. We usually try to get those out prior to closing. Sometimes we're getting them on the day of closing. It just depends on how backed up the surveyor is. We order them as soon as we are possibly able to order them. And they may be 10 to 15 days out, depending on the weather. We're coming into the rainy season, which sometimes means it takes them a little longer to get them back to us. But we will definitely make sure that we get those out to the clients as soon as we receive them. If there are any issues on the survey, we make everyone aware of that as soon as possible. What happens when there is an issue, usually the closer will come back to the manager and say, this is what I have. Can we insure this? We'll agree to insure or not insure, depending on the encroachments. We'll dig a little deeper into that. And then we will notify the parties at that time how we can proceed. All right, so reviewing the survey, we want to always look at the legal description, the certifications. What are certifications? Those are the certifications are the names that the people are the names that the survey is certified to. So meaning if your buyer is purchasing the property, the certification would be to your buyer, to the lender, and then to the title company and the underwriter. If we're using a prior survey, it has to be a prior survey that's in the name of the seller or one of the prior owners of that property if we're kind of passing that down the line. My suggestion is always get a new survey. You never know what's changed on that land, not just on your property, but the adjoining properties around the property that the buyer is purchasing. So it's a good practice to just go ahead and purchase a new survey. There's, you know, $300-400 to get a new survey. It's not the end of the world. And you've got that, again, that peace of mind is worth gold. So, all right. So here is a copy of a survey. So you can see the blue lines that go all the way around the property here. This is your boundary line of the property. This is a color coded one, so that's why I like to use it. The green lines here, this is the actual house where it sits on the property. So you can kind of see where the home sits. They've got a little covered screened area here. It looks like a little patio here. And then this is their driveway right here. This is the road. So they have access to the property. They have a 50-foot right-of-way easement that gives them access to the property. And then back here, you see where there's a shed sitting on the property. And then of course, this little dotted line, if you can see that real good, it's like a little X and dash, that's your fence on the property. So this gives you a good depiction of what, you know, is on the property, how it's set. It does not place trees, shrubs, landscaping. It doesn't place any of that stuff. And if you are dealing with FHA will require you to locate a well or septic if that is on the property as well. And sometimes you'll see that on a survey. So in this case, when we're looking at this survey, we see the shed that sits back here. And you see that this little dotted red line going through the property there, that is actually an easement on the property. What kind of easement is that? Well, if you look here, it says this is a 10-foot utility easement that's platted. So that means this is a lot and block that's it's a platted subdivision. And on the plat, there's a 10-foot easement granted for utilities. So each property here has 5 foot of that 10 foot. So the property here has 5 foot and the property behind them has 5 foot of that easement. In this specific case, this shed here actually encroaches into that easement. So remember, we talked about exceptions. This would be an exception on the final policy to your seller. And what that means is that if the utility company came in and said, I need you to move your shed because I need that last little 1.1 feet here that you have taken of the easement, I need to get into that portion. Then the owner would be responsible for moving that shed at their expense. Now, the likelihood of that is not great. It's very slim that would happen, but it can happen. Same thing with the fence in the back here. They could come in and ask you to move the fence because they need access to that easement to run new underground utilities or whatever the case is. And then the owner would be responsible for moving that fence at that time. So we do have a couple of questions here. Can a property be sold that does not have egress, i.e. landlocked, and would need to drop from the sky to get to the property? Cute. So the answer to that question is yes, it can. However, the new buyer needs to acknowledge there is no legal access to the property. Now, they may own the property in front of that, and they may be purchasing the property behind it or adjacent to it. And through that property, they may have they may have their own access to that property through, you know, the property they own in the front or adjacent to the property somewhere. So they don't care. And in that case, that's fine with us. We'll ensure that property less access to the property. So there'll be an exception on the policy for access, meaning they don't have legal access to the property, but they can access the property through their adjoining property. If they want to purchase a landlocked piece of property, they can. Again, it would be an exception on their policy, but the seller or the buyer needs to know what they're getting and what they're going to need to do to gain access to that. And that's going to be their responsibility to do that. I will tell you, if they own the adjacent property and they're purchasing the property behind them, legally, they cannot grant an access to themselves. So they can't do an easement access from themselves to themselves for the property adjacent to them. Now, if they are buying that to turn around and sell it to a family member, then they can sell it to the family member and do an easement from themselves to the family member, but they can't do it from themselves to themselves. I hope that makes sense. And I'll let you answer that, John, if that helps you. Okay. So moving on, these are the things that we look for. We look for obviously the legal description. We want to make sure that they have surveyed the correct property that's on the contract. They surveyed lot 39 and not lot 38 or 37 and surveyed their own property. It has happened. So we want to make sure that they did survey the correct one. We want to make sure that it's certified to the correct buyers. In this case, I changed some names to protect identities on this one. So Will Buyer, and then the title company, lender, and underwriter are all listed on there. It also tells you if the property is in a flood zone or not in a flood zone. If it is in a flood zone, they'll do a flood certificate. That's very helpful and useful to your buyers when they're having to get that flood insurance, and helps them save on the cost of the insurance based on the elevation. So that's hugely important. And then it also tells us any specific notes that they notated on the property when they went out and surveyed the property. So the driveway crosses the boundary line on the southerly side, shows the driveway crossing the boundary line. It shows the fences that are near the boundary line as shown in the ownership. The fences extend through the utility easement that we talked about, as well as the shed and concrete surface extend through the utility easement that we talked about. So it's going to tell us if they see any major issues on here. If the corner of the house is encroaching into the adjoining property, it's going to say the southwest corner of the block home encroaches into the adjacent property, adjoining property. We've seen those. So they can get a little hairy, and those we have to be either creative, or we got to try to work with the owner next door to see if they can buy that little 3-foot section of property to add to theirs, so they can not have that encroachment on there. So it can get a little touchy. Oh, that's interesting, Whippa. I didn't know that. So I'll have to look that up on the Goodson Strawberry Farm. I know exactly where that's at. So, Okay, so 5 great reasons to purchase a survey. So we're going to talk about this. So undisclosed rights and easements. You may own your new home and its surrounding land, but someone else might have a right to use a portion of your property. A survey will show physical evidence of the rights of others to use your property for access, parking, utilities, and other situations. So I'm going to give you a scenario. We had a closing several years ago. The survey was done. The driveway to the property, it was a property that sat behind another property. So they had an easement, an ingress, egress easement, access easement to get to the property. The driveway of the property ran up the east side of the property to the back. However, their actual ingress egress easement was on the west side of the property. So when the buyer purchased the home, the seller in the front closed off their driveway that they typically used to get back to the property. They did that because it was family. So we had family in the front who lived next to family in the back. Family in the back lost the property to foreclosure. They were mad that the family in the back lost the property, and they cut off access, or they cut off the access that they had always used to get back to the property. The seller or the buyer, even though it was disclosed to them where the easement was at and how that ran through, this is important for you as agents to know this so that you can educate your buyers and let them know if your easement's on the west side of the property, but the driveway's on the east side of the property, that's not your legal access on the east side. Your access is on the west side of the property, meaning if it's not cleared and created, has something in there for you to be able to drive across it, then if they close off your driveway on the east side, you're going to have to clear that land on the west side. So they didn't realize they were going to have to clear that land. It turns out it was a little swampy, a little hard to clear. So it cost them some money to do that, but they ended up having to do that in order to gain access to their property. That's why it's so important to educate your buyers when they're purchasing property, especially when they're purchasing property like that, where it's not a legally, or a platted subdivision and the access is very apparent and clear. When they're purchasing land like that, you want to make sure that you're getting all the meat of what they need to know, and you're giving that information to them so that they know exactly how they have to access their property. So that was a very touchy situation. We tried to work with the buyer as much as possible. I felt bad for the buyer. We all did, but we did disclose it to them on the survey, and they actually got a copy of the survey prior to closing to review as well. So All right, so number 2,
And I
is-
think there's this thing about that. It's good until it's not good,
go ahead.
you know? It's good until it's not good, you know?
Yeah.
You can tell them all day long and then until something bad
Then until it's
happens.
bad, and then it's really
And
bad.
they forgot that you told them at closing. So just, you know, keep them informed, make sure, you know, as agents, you're documenting your real estate, you know, your file as well.
Mhm.
You know, just so you're covered.
Yep. So undiscovered encroachments, a survey may be the only way to tell if a third party holds a claim to a part of your property because their improvements such as a garage, fence, or swimming pool are on land. So what that means is that, sure, you may have a prior survey from a seller that you can use, but you don't know what the people adjacent to you have done. So the people that live on either side of you may have built that house after your house, the house that you're buying or your buyer is buying, built theirs, or your seller built theirs. So they could be encroaching into your property and you don't know it. That's why it's so important to go ahead and get an extra, or go ahead and get that survey for your new buyer so they can see if there's any improvements that have been made by the adjacent or adjoining properties that could potentially cause issue on your property. So something to consider. Again, $300-400 for a standard lot and block. Sometimes I think they're even a little less than that depending. So it's worth it for them to purchase that. Number 3, the house is built on the incorrect lot. It may seem impossible, but sometimes a house is built on the wrong lot. A survey provides peace of mind by showing the exact location of the house. So we actually had a situation, another situation. We have lots of situations. Listen, if you want some stories, we could write a book. But we had a situation where the lots in the plat were actually wrong. So lot 11 was actually lot 6, and lot 6 was lot 11. It was reversed. They had it backwards. They had all of them backwards. It sounds convoluted. It is, but this is true. So the lender had mortgages on property that the buyer didn't even truly own, and they were all mixed up. So we helped them. I think there was 5 different lots out there, and we helped them fix all of those with our attorney, got involved, got with the landowners. We helped them get it corrected, but they had been that way for years and nobody ever knew it. So you just don't know sometimes and the survey is honestly how we found that. So I guess they didn't do a survey. I don't know how they went that long without knowing that was the way it was, but we did find that and found that through a survey, and we're able to help those people get those situations corrected. Not just our seller and our buyer, but all of the landowners out there of those 5 specific lots that were completely backwards. So interesting, crazy, but again, those things can happen. Number 4, the size of the property. A survey shows the exact dimensions of the property, boundary lines, and how much land is included within those lines. So everybody wants to know, especially when they're buying large parcels, what am I truly getting? And sometimes your sales price is based on that. It's so much per acre, right? So if the seller says you're getting 20 acres and it turns out you're getting 15, that's a big difference. So getting that boundary survey to tell you the dimensions and the size of the property can be very crucial in situations like that. And number 5, future additions. So many residential plotted lots can have building restrictions, which can prohibit you from building close to the boundary lines. Those are called setback lines. So a lot of times you'll have a setback line set by the county or by the developer that may be 5, 10, 15, 20, sometimes even 30 to 50 feet, depending on the size of the property. So you'll need to know that if you're going to build a pool or if you're going to put a big barn or shop on the property, you want to make sure that you don't have it set in that setback line. So that's another great reason to purchase a survey. Does anybody have any other questions on that? All right. So either I have put you to sleep or I did really good.
You did really good. See, someone's hand is up.
Thank you, Jimmy. All right. Brian has raised his hand. Are you raising your hand because you're saying awesome job, or do you have a question? I'm a huge jokester, so please don't take me seriously. I like to have fun when I do these things. So that is your Title 101. Obviously, if you have any questions, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize Jane's name was on here. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Misty, Megan. We are always here to help answer your questions on these things. One of the things that I wanted to share with you guys, I told you guys I had some tidbits I wanted to give you at the end of the class. Property lines into canals. So Jimmy, question, please. If there's a discrepancy and the buyer finds out at closing when reviewing the survey, how is the buyer protected on the contract? And Misty gave her cell number there. So let's go. Jimmy had a question about property lines into canals. So can you be more specific on that? Or not Jimmy, John, I'm sorry. Jimmy, John. But really just John. John, can you be a little more specific on your question? If you'll chat that to me, I will be happy to answer that question for you. And then Amy, if there's a discrepancy and the buyer finds out at closing when reviewing the survey, how is the buyer protected? I think buyer protected on the contract. So I don't know contractually how to answer that question for you. That would be a question that would be something that I would have to present to our attorney to ask them how you're protected contractually. However, from our perspective, when we review, you are asking if Jimmy knows. Okay. Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, you can go ahead and keep doing your thing.
Okay. So, so yes, our goal is if there's a discrepancy on the survey is always to get that to you up front. We want you to know when there are issues, we want you to know. So if we get the survey in and there is a discrepancy on the survey, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are letting you as the agent and the buyer know the fence encroaches into the adjoining property or the fence encroaches into the easement so that your buyer is aware, again, educated and knows what that means. Maybe it's the shed, whatever the case is. A lot of times, most times we close on those and there's not an issue. The buyer is fine with it. It's a minor encroachment into the property. However, when you're dealing with let's say you're dealing with a pool and the deck of the pool is in the easement, sometimes they may want the seller to get that portion of the easement vacated. If it's not in the water, meaning the easement doesn't cross the water line of the pool, we will insure the property, but there will be an exception for that encroachment on the survey. So meaning, again, if the county came in and says we need this portion of the property to run our utilities underground or to correct the drainage in the area, then they can require you to literally cut that portion of your patio off. The likelihood of that is very slim, but I can't say it can never happen. We can never predict what can or cannot happen, right? We can't predict what will happen when we walk out the door every morning or every day, going to work or going home. So I can't promise that would never happen, but it's a very slim chance that could happen. So I hope that partially answers your question with the acceptance of how it protects you on the contract.
And, and I'll add just a tiny bit to that because, I'm just looking at the as-is contract. It does talk about if the survey discloses encroachments of real property of the improvements located, setback lines, easements, things like that, the buyer has to deliver notice to the seller within 5 days of receiving the survey. And then it goes back up to title examination and standard A, which says sellers have 30 days after receipt of buyer's notice, take reasonable, diligent effort to remove the defects. Now you may come to a negotiation, take the exceptions, whatever that might look like. But in the contract, it does call out, and it's up to the buyer to notify the seller of these things and get them to them. And then basically it even says if you find it within 10 days after buyer's receipt of seller's notice. I mean, I'm just reading this for you real quick. I apologize. It says the cure period can extend up to 120 days. The buyer can elect to accept title with the existing defects. That's typically what I see happen. it depending on what the defect actually is. But it says after the cure, they can elect to terminate the contract and receive a refund of the deposit.
That's great to know. I'll be honest with you. I've never read that portion. I always look for the things that I need to look at that affect us from a title perspective, but knowing that, I will know how to answer that question next time. So thank you so much for sharing that. Something else I wanted to share. I know we have a property right now, and I think it's actually, Megan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's actually in Apollo Beach where there is a house that sits in the middle of an alley. Is that your property, Megan?
No, that may be India's.
Oh, no. Okay. Misty knows because I think it's one of Misty's, not one of Misty's. Just kidding. It was a test. You guys passed. So there's a house that sits in the front, and then there's like a separate home rental property or whatever, rental property or in-law quarters or whatever you want to call that sits in the back. And that property sits into the middle of an alleyway. The thought was the alleyway had been vacated. However, we determined that the alleyway was not vacated, and there's actually utilities that run through that alleyway, and the county will not vacate that alley. They won't even vacate that portion of the alley that has the home that sits in the middle of the alleyway. So that is why having a survey is so important. We won't insure that unless they can get it vacated, and unfortunately they can't get it vacated. So the only way we would insure the title on that property is if they were paying cash, which unfortunately they are not. They have a lender, and truly that is the only way, unless they can get it vacated or they remove the in-law quarters that's in the back. It is a wood, it's not a block home, it's a wood home. It's built out of wood, so obviously that's what a wood home would be. I'm full of stuff today, but anyway, that is a situation that we have going on right now. So again, why it's so important. And then what about additions to structure of the home? I have an old survey without this, and Paramount approved the survey. If one of the questions we always ask the seller is, are there improvements on the property? If the seller says they're not improvements on the property, and you know there are, and they provided this survey to us that doesn't include those improvements, please let us know that, because that is something that we ask up front. That is the only way we will use that survey. Unless the improvements are like a fence or something that is a movable structure, we will not approve the use of that survey. So please, if you have that situation going on and we approve that survey and you're aware of additions to the structure, get with us immediately, let us know that, and we will stop. We won't.
And just so you guys know, in the contract for a survey, if there's a prior
and that's
survey,
so important when you guys are.
sorry,
No, you're good.
I'm just going to throw out there that if a seller does have a prior survey, they need to deliver that to the buyer and the closing agent within 5 days after effective date. So when you go under contract, you have plenty of time to be able to look at that survey if they're going to be, if we can use it, and if they're going to use it, they have 5 days to get that to the closing agent, to the buyer.
And that also gives us enough time if we have to order a survey for the survey company to go out and do that work correctly, and not to send it out before the closing date so you guys can review it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Any other questions? These are great. You guys are challenging today.
You know, that's how we roll.
I love to be challenged.
That's how we roll.
All right. So I told you I had something I wanted to share with you. It's something that I feel that is so important for you guys as agents out there in this market, and the craziness that we deal with in this time is just insane. So if you have a seller who reaches out to you and says, I want to sell my vacant land, and you are talking to the seller and you get everything set up with them, they only communicate with you via email or text. They never call you. And when they do, it's very rare that they would call you. I want you to know that should be a huge red flag to you immediately. There is so much fraud going on in the industry today with vacant lands and absentee owners. So if that property is unencumbered, meaning there are no mortgages against that property whatsoever, that immediately should start making your hair stand up on the back of your neck. It may be nothing, but it's better to be cautious than to get into the middle of the transaction and find out we're dealing with a fraudulent seller. I will tell you, I get these probably 3 times at least, if not more, a week. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but on average, at least 3 times a week, we are dealing with a fraudulent seller on a contract. We get constantly, every single day, we get multiple properties. And by multiple, I mean probably 10 to 20 properties sent to us from our underwriters that are properties that have been listed and attempted to be sold and are fraudulent transactions. So we add them to our list, and we of course always search that list to make sure that we're protecting everybody. Some of the things that we do is we ask the seller to have a conference call with us via video. It can be through our Zoom, through our Ring Central, it can be FaceTime. I don't care how it is, just to get them to do that. When you are dealing with a person who is, and I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this, and I don't think that you guys would take it that way, but who is elderly, let's say they're in their 80s and they're very tech savvy, that should raise a red flag. Most people that are in their 80s, not all, but most, are not going to know how to do DocuSign. They're not going to know how to sign things remotely for us. Texting and emailing is probably not going to be a big thing for them. So that should raise a red flag to you as an agent, and it raises red flags to us as the title agent. So we watch for those things. Another one we had one recently where the seller was selling, let me put that in quotations, was selling their property. And it turns out the agent that they reached out to via text or email was an agent who worked with the seller before. So the seller that he knew is of Oriental descent, and the seller that he was talking to on the phone had more of a Jamaican sound. So definitely not the seller of the property, and it didn't fit the name, obviously. So that, obviously was an immediate red flag, and he pretty much knew at that point that the seller wasn't who they said they were. So protect yourself out there. It's great, and I know that you guys depend on that, and we want it to close as much as you do. And for me, I would rather have a contract come in and cancel for legitimate reasons than have a fraudulent contract come in, waste our time, our efforts, our energy on this person buying this property and find out that they're fraudulent. We've had one that was $995,000. It was vacant land. It was a large parcel of land that was being sold, and the seller was fraudulent. So that hurt. And you've put your time, your money, your effort into that. So just protect yourself, ask the right questions, make them have a conversation with you on the phone, not just via text and email. It may seem easy for them. Ask them for a copy of their ID. There are so many fraudulent IDs out there. We had one from an 84-year-old lady. The ID was so clean, it looked like it had never touched a surface. It had not a scratch on it, and it was from 2015. So, but you could see where the person cut and paste their picture onto the ID, or the picture that they had of the lady on the ID, or of a lady. I don't know if it was the same lady. So just protect yourself. Make sure that you're asking the right questions, you're doing the right things to cover your bases, and make sure that you're dealing with a legitimate person. Even if you're working with the buyer, I would get with, the agent, maybe working with the seller. If there is an agent, sometimes there's not. But if you're working with the buyer, get with the seller, get with us, just to double check, or whoever you're working with, double check. We had another one that turns out that people were purchasing the property, the vacant land next door to them. They went out one morning and there was a man mowing the property. They went over and talked to the man, and it turns out the man said he had just purchased the property. We were able to get with the underwriters immediately, let them know that we had a fraudulent seller and that there was potentially a sale already done and consummated on the property. to try to get that stopped ASAP. Because we were so quick in getting that information out to them, the underwriter, we sent it to all the underwriters. The underwriter that actually insured that purchase that happened was able to get with that agent, and they were actually able to stop the recording of the deed and the funds going out to the seller. So luckily the buyer didn't lose their money in that situation, but that could have been a lot worse if that hadn't been done as quickly as it was and hadn't been found. So again, I just wanted to share that with you guys. I think it's so important right now with everything that we're dealing with and all the craziness going on in this world, that we try to help each other, educate each other, and protect ourselves when we're dealing with situations like this. So I hope you don't mind me taking a few extra minutes to go over that. But I just felt it was so important because it is so prevalent in our industry right now to share that with you guys. I want to buy a private island too, John.
Yeah. I'll use the funds that I got from the general from wherever it is that sends you an email saying you won $1 million. I'll use that to buy the land.
Yes, yes.
All right. Well, thank you. No, that was fantastic information. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. If you guys ever need anything at all, you of course have my number. You have Misty's number. You obviously, I'm sure, have Megan's number as well. We're all here to help you guys and get you Bitcoin. Yes, Bitcoin, John, for sure. I'm going to send you my Bitcoin right away.
Yeah. We got you.
Oceanfront property in Arizona, right?
Yep. There we go. That's right.
All right. Well, thank you again. If you guys have any other questions, please let us know. Again, we are here to serve you and help you and protect you any way we can. So appreciate your time and appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to share with you guys this morning, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for jumping on, all of you ladies. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Everybody else have a fantastic Thursday, June the 9th. Wow, I still can't believe it's June already.
No.
Tune in tomorrow. Craig will be back doing some master the contract training. I'm sure he's going to have a ton of info from his 2100 club event he went to this week. So thank you again for joining, and rock it out. Have fun.
Thank you. Bye. Peace out.